Some nights change your life in a way you can never go back. That night was exactly one of those nights for me. I'm 63 years old. I spent years teaching, living my life in order, following certain rules. Then I retired and settled in a small, quiet town. I learned how to live with loneliness. After losing Edgar, I thought I'd spend the rest of my life in peace. But no matter how much you think you've said goodbye to the past, some things show up at your door when you least expect them. Like Carlos coming back, Edgar's stepson. I hadn't seen him in 3 years. Back then, he was just a reckless, carefree kid. But now, standing in front of me, he was a 27-year-old man. Life hadn't been kind to him. I could hear it in his voice when he called and asked, "Can I stay with you for a while?" I could tell he needed help. Of course, my door was open to him. But the moment I opened that door and saw the man standing there, I realized maybe I was the one who needed help. Carlos had changed. His shoulders were broader, his eyes deeper. That boyish look was gone, replaced by something else, something bigger, stronger, and with a different kind of pull. But the real difference? I felt it the next night in the kitchen. That night, the night everything started. The air felt heavy in a strange way. There was this restlessness inside me, but I couldn't put my finger on why. Maybe I just wasn't used to hearing someone else's breath in my house after all these years of living alone. Carlos had left early in the morning and hadn't come back all day. He looked troubled. I could see it in his eyes, but I didn't ask why. Some wounds aren't meant to be opened until you're ready. It was close to midnight when I finally heard the lock turn. I felt relieved, but at the same time, there was this odd tension in my chest. When Carlos walked in, the exhaustion on his face and the slight looseness from alcohol were impossible to miss. He was a little drunk, but not out of control. When our eyes met, I could see he was carrying something heavy inside him. "You okay?" I asked as I closed the door behind him. He nodded, took a deep breath, and leaned back. "It's been a long night," he said, his voice low and tired. Looking at him, I felt this wave of tenderness. This young man was carrying too much weight on his shoulders. I hesitated for a second, then turned toward the kitchen. "I'll make you some coffee," I said. "Might help you sober up a bit." As I walked into the kitchen, Carlos followed me. While I stood at the small counter making coffee, I could feel his eyes on me. Even with my back turned, I knew he was watching me. "This place is warmer than I expected," he said suddenly. I glanced at him over my shoulder. "You mean the town? Warmer than anywhere I've been?" He answered, but his eyes weren't looking at the kitchen. They were looking at me. For a second, my heart pounded so hard I thought it might jump out of my chest. He was watching me. For the first time in years, I felt someone's gaze on my skin. If you love hearing these kinds of confessions, make sure to join my channel, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Trust me, you won't want this story to end. The silence in the kitchen, as the coffee brewed, said more than words ever could. Carlos leaned against the counter, one hand in his pocket, the other running through his hair as he looked at me. He looked tired, maybe even a little broken. I knew he was watching me, but I focused on placing the coffee cups on the counter, avoiding his gaze. There was a strange unease inside me, but at the same time a warmth I couldn't explain. "You know," Carlos said after a moment, his voice soft, thoughtful. "Sometimes, no matter where you go, you can't escape feeling lonely." I looked into his eyes as I handed him his cup. There was a vulnerability there I hadn't seen in a long time. "Loneliness is a strange thing," I said, my voice carrying a quiet sadness. "Sometimes you get so used to it that even when someone shows up, you don't know how to handle it." Carlos took the cup, bringing it to his lips. "And you?" he asked, taking a sip of his coffee. "Did you get used to it?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of that question settle over me. I don't know if I'd call it getting used to it. I admitted. But over time, I learned to accept it. Life doesn't go back to what it was. But that doesn't mean you stop thinking about what's missing. Carlos nodded, but he didn't look away. Sometimes people think they've gotten used to being alone, he said in a quiet voice. But really, they're just trying not to feel anything. Something about his words stirred something deep inside me. Maybe he was right. Maybe I hadn't really gotten used to being alone. I had just been avoiding feeling anything at all. For a moment, there was silence, the only sound coming from the ticking clock in the kitchen. Carlos traced the rim of his coffee cup with his fingers, watching me, his expression unreadable. There was warmth in his eyes, but also a restraint. Like he was trying not to cross a line. "You know, I've never seen you like this before," he said suddenly, a small smile playing on his lips. I raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" He shrugged, not looking away. "Still this strong, and still this beautiful after all these years." His words sent a small ripple through me, but I tried not to show it. I lowered my eyes to my coffee cup, smiling slightly. "I guess time can't change everything," I said softly. Something settled between us in that moment. Maybe a closeness, maybe the rebirth of something long missing. But I wasn't sure what it was, or if I even wanted to know. When I noticed how late it had gotten, I stood up trying to shake off the confusion inside me. "I should get to bed," I said with a small smile. "It's been a long day." Carlos nodded, but his eyes stayed on me. "Yeah, you're right." As I placed my cup in the sink and walked out of the kitchen, I could feel his gaze following me. It left an emptiness in my mind, a lingering thought I couldn't quite hold on to. As I made my way to my bedroom, there was a storm inside me. That conversation had stirred something deep, something I didn't know how to name. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I felt it again. That strange feeling. Carlos had changed. Not just in the way he looked, but in the way he carried himself, the way he spoke. And that change was forcing me to face something I had been running from for a long time. I didn't know what it was, but I could feel that something had already begun. After that night, things started to change. It wasn't something we talked about, but it became more obvious with each passing day. The distance between Carlos and me had noticeably shrunk. I don't even know how to explain it. But when I watched him sip his coffee in the kitchen, or when our eyes met over breakfast, it was getting harder to ignore the way my stomach fluttered. I wasn't the same as before. It was like something inside me was waking up and I wasn't fighting it. I started moving more freely around the house. In the mornings, I didn't bother tying my robe as tightly as I used to, like I did back when I lived alone, but I wasn't alone anymore. Carlos was here, and even though I was fully aware of that, there wasn't a part of me that felt uncomfortable about it. I could tell Carlos was becoming more aware of me too. He wasn't acting the same way he did when he first got here. Within a few weeks, he seemed to have moved beyond just getting used to being here. He was acting like he belonged, like he wasn't just staying for a while, but like he had settled in for good. Most nights, instead of going out, he stayed with me. We'd have dinner together, talk for hours, and somewhere along the way, we started having movie nights. Sprawled out on the couch watching films, time just slipped away. Carlos would make comments, sometimes laugh out loud, and I'd catch myself watching him instead of the screen. There was a warmth inside me I hadn't felt in years. I never thought I could feel this comfortable around someone again. But that night was different. The closeness that had been growing between us for weeks felt even stronger in the air. We were watching a movie. The room was dimly lit, the flickering glow of the street lamp outside casting soft, shifting shadows through the half-open curtains. Carlos's hand rested on the couch beside mine, his fingers just barely brushing against mine. As the movie played, I became aware of a slow-building tension between us. The space between our hands was getting smaller and smaller, as if neither of us was consciously making a move, but we were somehow closing the gap anyway. At some point, I felt his gaze shift from the screen to me. Slowly, I turned my head and our eyes met. This time, there was nothing hesitant about the way he looked at me. He wasn't trying to hide anything. His eyes locked onto mine, deep and unreadable, filled with something unspoken. His breaths were slow, measured. My heart pounded so hard I thought could hear it, but I didn't look away. It was like every word we could have said had disappeared, leaving only this moment between us. Carlos tilted his head slightly, his lips parting just a little, and in that moment, I had no idea what I was supposed to do. But I knew one thing. This was just the beginning, and there was no going back. Carlos didn't hesitate. He leaned in, his face so close that I could feel the warmth of his breath against my skin. His lips barely brushed against mine at first, as if giving me a chance to pull away. But I didn't, I couldn't. That fire inside me, the one I had ignored for so long, wouldn't let me. 1 second, maybe 2. The kiss started slow, then deepened, turning into something more intense, more desperate, the way he pulled me against him, the way his hands wrapped around my waist. It brought back feelings I had forgotten for years. My hands moved instinctively to his shoulders, my fingers tangling in his hair. Carlos's touch. It was so firm, so certain. I could feel just how deep the emotions he had been holding back truly were. But right at that moment, reality crashed over me like a thick fog. This was wrong. A sudden wave of panic rose inside me. I pulled back quickly, my breath still tangled with his. His eyes were full of questions, but I couldn't answer any of them. My hands are shaking, I whispered, more to myself than to him, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I stood up, my heart hammering in my chest. I need to get some water, I said, grabbing onto the first excuse I could find. I turned toward the kitchen, avoiding his gaze. I wasn't even sure if my feet were touching the floor or if I was floating. My pulse was pounding in my ears. I grabbed a glass, my fingers trembling slightly. What the hell is happening? I murmured to myself. How did this even happen? As my thoughts spun, a sharp crashing sound snapped me out of it. Then the unmistakable noise of shattered glass scattering across the floor. Every muscle in my body tensed. Carlos, I called out. No answer. I rushed back into the living room, then froze. The glass coffee table in front of the couch was completely shattered, and Carlos's hand. It was bleeding. I didn't even have to ask what had happened. Out of frustration, anger, or maybe something deeper that he couldn't hold back anymore, he had thrown his glass down onto the table, breaking it to pieces. Seeing the blood on his hand sent a strange mix of fear and guilt through me. Slowly, I sat down next to him, but he wouldn't look at me. His eyes were locked on the floor, his breath uneven. His fists were still clenched, his jaw tight. I reached out, placing my hand lightly on his arm. The moment I touched him, he flinched. Then finally, he turned to look at me. And in his eyes, there wasn't just anger. There was hurt. Do you really not want me? He asked, his voice low but filled with emotion. I couldn't look away. What? I whispered. But he wasn't done. For days. I haven't felt alone for the first time in a long time, Maria, he said. And then you pulled away like it meant nothing, like it was just a moment that didn't matter. I shook my head. Something inside me was breaking because I knew exactly what he was thinking. I knew how fragile Carlos really was. I knew how much he feared being abandoned. And now I had just made him live through his worst fear. I took his hand gently, carefully opening his palm and looking at the bleeding cuts. This wasn't just a moment, I said. My voice wasn't supposed to shake, but it did. Nothing about this was fake, Carlos. Everything was real. Too real. He narrowed his eyes, wanting to believe me, but afraid. I could feel it. Do you really not love me, Maria? Do you really not want me? Those silent questions hung heavy in the air. I held my breath, silencing every thought screaming inside me. Slowly, I stood up. I ran my hands over my shoulders and let the straps of my dress slide down. His eyes followed the movement, darkening. His pupils dilated. His breathing turned uneven. Now he had no words left. Do you believe me now, Carlos? I whispered, my voice sparking the heat between us even more. Was it all a lie? His gaze roamed over me and he swallowed hard. But he still couldn't say a single word. Instead, he grabbed me by the waist and pulled me against him. Rough, urgent. And then his lips crashed onto mine like a starving man. This time, I wasn't the one running. This time, I was the one surrendering completely. With Carlos's strong arms locked around my waist, I knew there was no going back. A man who kissed like this, hungry, desperate, claiming, wasn't here for just a passing moment. When I looked into his eyes, I saw everything he had been holding back. His emotions, his desire, even his frustration. I hadn't felt this alive in years. Carlos's breath was uneven, his fingers trailing slowly down my back. Then suddenly, he reached for the buttons of his shirt, undoing them one by one without taking his eyes off me. Like he was memorizing me. Like he was trying to etch this moment into his mind to prove it was real. When he finally shrugged off his shirt, tossing it next to my dress, my gaze instinctively traveled over his body. This wasn't the same Carlos I once knew. With broad shoulders, a firm chest, and sharp, defined lines, he was nothing less than a man. Carlos leaned back against the couch, his arms loosening for just a second, giving me space, watching me. And me, I wasn't hesitating anymore. I slowly placed my knees on the couch, moving over him. My hands rested against his bare chest, and the second I felt the heat of his skin under my fingertips, a spark ignited inside me. And just like that, I leaned in closer and pressed my lips to his again. This time, our kiss was deeper, hungrier, and far more dangerous. I felt something huge inside me, bigger than anything I had ever felt before. Everything was happening so fast, but I didn't care. Every now and then, I found myself whispering Carlos. I was completely lost in him. I was excited. And with the rush of that excitement and desire, it didn't take long for everything to reach its peak. My fingers gripped the couch, then slowly moved to Carlos's chest. My whole body trembled as I tightened, and a loud sound escaped from my lips. My nails left a few marks on his skin. Carlos looked at me, smiling. These shouldn't just be memories. You have to keep them fresh. It didn't take long before the tension in him melted away, and with the heat of the moment, he completely let himself go, breathless, giving into everything. We were both calmer now. We lay next to each other, neither of us speaking until our breathing evened out. That night, as we lay there side by side, a heavy weight settled inside me. What the hell were we doing? I took a deep breath, staring up at the ceiling. What happens now, Carlos? This feels wrong. I whispered. Carlos turned his head toward me, his eyes more serious than I'd ever seen them before. This isn't wrong, Maria. This is real. We can't act like we were some kind of mistake we're going to leave somewhere. No one knows us somewhere. No one can judge us. I want a happy life with you. His words hit me hard. Was he serious? For even a second I had thought maybe this was just a passing thing, a moment of weakness. But now his words carried a much deeper meaning. I turned to him in shock, my eyes searching his. Did you think this was just some 1 week thing? Carlos didn't look away. Maria, I've wanted this for years. My heart nearly stopped. What do you mean? You mean before? Carlos let out a small, almost sad smile. 5. 6 years ago, even when Edgar was alive, even when we lived in the same house, I liked you. I wasn't ready to hear that. My heart pounded like crazy. Carlos, I whispered, but I had no idea what to say. Carlos sat up slightly, leaning closer. Back then, it felt like some stupid, impossible thing. Like I was just a kid. But I'm not a kid anymore, Maria. I know what I feel. Somewhere deep inside me, hearing those words sent a strange sense of satisfaction through me. But at the same time, fear. Could I really go through with this? Stay tuned, because this story isn't over. If you've made it this far, I know this story has pulled you in. There's so much more to share. You don't want to miss it. Hit that follow button, turn on notifications, and drop a comment below.